Yes, put your seats in the upright position. Grab your drink. Now I'm going to tell you the extraordinary story of Switzerland. A country of mountains, banks, lots of chocolate, and a place that makes you think, geographically speaking, a country really shouldn't exist here. No coastline, no oil, everyone speaking different languages, and borders that twist and turn everywhere. On top of that, for centuries, it was surrounded by massive empires, constantly thinking, should we conquer this place? Yet somehow, Switzerland ended up teaching the entire world a lesson in how to become wealthy. It all started in a meadow, without bloodshed or drama. Our unusual story begins about 750 years ago, in 1291. In a way completely contrary to the spirit of the era, 3 men met peacefully in a meadow. There were no beheadings, no battles for the throne, no political intrigue. They simply promised one another, "We'll have each other's backs through good times and bad, okay?" That sweet and peaceful alliance became the birth story of Switzerland. Of course, that atmosphere of peace didn't last very long. 24 years later, in 1315, the new Swiss Confederation faced its first major test, the Battle of Morgarten. Standing against them was the heavily armed and highly trained Austrian army, which had set its sights on Switzerland's Schwyz region. The Swiss side, meanwhile, consisted mostly of farmers who had never seen battle before. It was a classic David versus Goliath story. On paper, the Swiss had absolutely no chance. But everything changed when their neighbors tipped them off that the Austrians were coming. With reinforcements of 600 men arriving from the alliance's other cantons, the Swiss quickly mobilized to intercept the enemy near Sattel. They built barricades along a narrow path between 2 lakes and waited. Then came the famous ambush. These Swiss shepherds and farmers, who knew nothing about knightly rules or battlefield etiquette, unleashed such devastation upon the Austrian army that 1,500 Austrian soldiers lost their lives there. Some Austrians were reportedly so terrified of the Swiss assault that they threw themselves into the lake. After this incredible victory, the Swiss Confederation began thinking, maybe we're actually good at this. It started to grow. First Lucerne joined, then Zurich. Much like the Italian city-states of the period, these cities were connected by relatively loose alliances. The reason Switzerland still doesn't have a single dominant capital like Paris or London, but instead consists of cities with relatively equal power, lies in this old cantonal culture. By the early 1500s, the Swiss were basically in full, "we run this place" mode. They had defeated the Austrians, crushed the Burgundians, and created a reputation across Europe as an unstoppable force. Riding that wave of confidence, they marched into northern Italy with 25,000 soldiers, conquered towns, and took Milan from the French. Nobody seemed capable of stopping them, until that fateful day when everything changed. Fine, we're not playing anymore. The Battle of Marignano and Neutrality. In 1515, the French returned seeking revenge. Their earlier defeat had been a bitter pill to swallow. Near the small village of Marignano in northern Italy, they smashed the Swiss army, beat them, then beat them some more, leaving them utterly devastated. Normally, you'd expect the Swiss to start plotting revenge, right? Instead, they did something very unusual. They basically said, "Okay, boss, you win. Please stop hitting us." They handed Milan back to the French and signed a peace agreement. They probably didn't realize it at the time, but this crushing defeat marked the official beginning of what would become the world-famous concept of Swiss neutrality. Switzerland stopped fighting wars for itself, but Swiss soldiers remained some of the most feared, ruthless, and effective warriors in Europe. The Swiss Confederation responded with remarkable business sense. If we're not fighting for ourselves anymore, why not rent out our soldiers and make money? Thus, manpower became Switzerland's first major export. And these weren't just ordinary men. When you hired a Swiss military unit, you got an entire battalion of battle-hardened warriors who understood each other perfectly, from officers to infantrymen. In a way, they resembled the Unsullied from Game of Thrones. These mercenaries became so popular that nearly every European empire wanted them. They fought across the continent, and sometimes Swiss soldiers hired by opposing nations ended up facing and killing one another on the battlefield. The mercenary industry was eventually banned in the mid-19th century. There was only one exception: the Swiss Guards, who still protect the Pope in the Vatican today with their colorful uniforms. Napoleon's flag prank and the Congress of Vienna. For centuries, Switzerland's mountains acted like a natural fortress, allowing it to avoid Europe's endless wars. Then, in 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte arrived. Napoleon swept away the old confederation of 13 cantons and replaced it with the centralized Helvetic Republic. You could even say he gave the country the foundations of its modern national identity. Just kidding. This French-style centralization didn't suit the Swiss at all, and the system collapsed after only 5 years. Napoleon eventually had no choice but to restore a modified version of the old confederation. When Napoleon left the stage of history in 1815, the Congress of Vienna restored Switzerland's independence. More importantly, Europe's great powers formally recognized Switzerland's permanent neutrality. This is where the door to immense wealth truly opened. European elites suddenly saw a country with a guarantee that war would never reach its borders. Wealthy individuals rushed to Swiss banks to protect, preserve, and secure their fortunes. People with money kept coming, and money itself kept flowing into the country. The world's safest piggy bank, the banking secret. Switzerland was already prepared for this flood of wealthy clients and their even wealthier descendants. A century earlier, it had introduced banking secrecy laws. Under these laws, revealing customer information was considered a serious crime. While the rest of Europe chased colonies and fought endless wars, Switzerland quietly expanded its banking sector and arms industry behind the shield of neutrality. Economically, the Swiss also made moves far ahead of their time. They eliminated internal customs duties between cantons, introduced a common currency, and granted citizens freedom of movement within the country. The rest of Europe wouldn't fully embrace such ideas for another century. Before the Swiss franc was introduced, more than 860 different coins circulated throughout the country, a complete mess. Creating a single currency helped unify both the economy and the nation itself. Around this time, General Dufour noticed something missing in the military: a sense of national identity. Having united the country through money, Switzerland now sought to unite it symbolically. To rally everyone under one banner, they adopted the red and white square flag we know today. Switzerland is one of only 2 countries in the world with a square national flag. The other one? The Vatican, the place protected by those Swiss guards. Coincidence? Maybe. Everything for the people, direct democracy, and the world wars. Following a brief civil war in 1848, the Swiss federal state was officially established. But this wasn't an ordinary state. The Swiss introduced something unusual called direct democracy. Politicians couldn't simply pass major laws on their own. Significant decisions had to be put directly to the people through referendums. This had 2 major effects. Whenever the government wanted to spend money, citizens could essentially ask, "And where exactly is that money going?" and vote against it. As a result, taxes remained relatively low. On the other hand, decision-making became incredibly slow. Something that might take 1 minute elsewhere could take days, months, or even years. Women didn't receive the right to vote until 1971. Yes, really, 1971. That delay was partly a consequence of the very system that made Switzerland so stable. And stability was exactly what bankers loved. Geography also seemed to be helping them. The Swiss Alps provided ideal locations for hidden underground vaults where wealthy individuals could store gold, diamonds, and other valuables. Maybe the tunnels were dug by the giant badger moles from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Who knows? When World War I broke out, Swiss bankers quickly promoted their services across Europe. They introduced numbered bank accounts, where numbers replaced names. As governments raised taxes to fund the war effort, wealthy individuals eager to protect their fortunes moved money into Switzerland. The country's multilingual nature was another advantage. French clients could work comfortably in Geneva, Germans in Zurich, and Italians in Lugano. World War II brought a new challenge. Switzerland remained neutral, but continued conducting financial business with both sides. Gold looted by Nazi Germany ended up in Swiss vaults, and loans were extended to both Germany and Italy. At the same time, many German Jewish business people fleeing Nazi persecution also trusted Swiss banks with their assets. To protect this secrecy, Switzerland strengthened banking secrecy laws in 1934, making violations a federal crime. When rumors emerged in 1940 that Germany might invade Switzerland, banks began moving gold and valuables into fortified mountain bunkers. The Swiss military prepared a strategy known as the National Redoubt. In the event of invasion, cities would be abandoned, and the army would retreat into the mountains for a prolonged guerrilla war. Hitler ultimately concluded that invading a country with no major natural resources and nearly impossible terrain would be too costly. Perhaps he underestimated the wealth hidden within those mountains. The lifeboat in the storm, and saying no to global clubs. It sounds strange, but Switzerland often became wealthier whenever the rest of the world descended into chaos. It was a country that seemed to profit from instability without actually participating in it. Its cities escaped destruction, its infrastructure remained intact, and after every conflict, it was ready to do business. When it became known after the war that some Nazi assets had passed through Swiss banks, Britain and France pressured Switzerland to abandon banking secrecy. Switzerland refused. The country's commitment to confidentiality remained largely intact despite intense criticism and pressure. Then came the United Nations, and later the European Union. Many assumed Switzerland would rush to join both. They were wrong. Few things bother the Swiss more than outsiders telling them what to do. As a result, Switzerland has consistently resisted deeper political integration. Despite hosting one of the United Nations' major headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland didn't become a UN member until 2002. Switzerland today. Even negative interest rates can't scare people away. Today, Switzerland's banking sector manages assets worth more than $3 trillion. Over $2 trillion in international wealth, from countries such as France, Germany, and Saudi Arabia, flows through Swiss financial institutions. Although scandals involving illicit money occasionally emerge, the world's wealthy remain deeply attracted to Switzerland. Why? Because while American and British banks are often criticized for taking risks in pursuit of higher profits, Swiss banks have traditionally marketed themselves around stability, security, and trust. At times, wealthy clients have even accepted negative interest rates simply to keep their money there. Of course, Switzerland is far more than just banking. The country produces some of the world's finest watches, optical instruments, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals. Not to mention its globally famous cheese and chocolate. My personal favorite chocolate? Toblerone, of course. Did you know that products such as aluminum foil, Velcro, and the electric toothbrush were also Swiss inventions? And then there's the legendary rail network. Expensive, comfortable, and famously punctual down to the second. Swiss scientists deserve plenty of credit as well. In short, today, Switzerland is a paradise that attracts more than 4 million tourists every year, thanks to its high quality of life, extremely low crime rates, and low unemployment. While great empires rose and fell, Switzerland managed to overcome its geographic disadvantages and become one of Europe's wealthiest countries through neutrality, smart innovation, and an unwavering ability to sell one thing above all else: trust. The biggest reasons Switzerland became a global financial center are trust and neutrality. If you'd like to see more stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It would make me very happy. I'm counting on you.